biggest headlines from week one is obviously the injury to Dak Prescott, the Dallas Cowboys. Now, we know he's going to be out for a while, so we ain't got to worry about him for fantasy. But to me, the interesting question is, what are the implications, in your opinion, Samantha, on the Cowboys skill players, right? Like the Pollards, the Zekes, the Dalton Schultzes of the world, and of course the wideout group. I mean, it didn't look like the Cowboys were doing much work even with Dak. What do you think is the impact for some of the skill position players now that Dak's going to be gone for the better part of a few months?
Oh God, I'm very concerned. I mean, I was concerned about Lamb in that game. And like, to your point, Dak played most of that game, 2 catches for 29 yards and a 27% target share at the same time. Makes no sense for a guy that we were drafting as probably a top 7 wide receiver. So I'm very frustrated with him. He ended up as wide receiver 71. So like, regardless of the quarterback situation, I was already concerned, and now it's just like a trash fire. So I'm kind of downgrading him into that like high-end wide receiver 2 tier.
Okay.
I'm like, that's still a little optimistic given like that stink fest, but I am convinced that he is like a more talented player than that stat line would suggest. Sure. Now Schultz actually had a pretty nice day, 7 catches for 62 yards, had a decent target share, ended as tight end 8. Tight ends, we kind of know, are a little more immune to bad quarterback play. I mean, we haven't seen too much from Cooper Rush. The game was really tied, like, you know, pretty much over at that point. But I think like Schultz will probably maintain his value for the most part. The running backs were not great. I mean, so Ezekiel Elliott from the eye test looked a lot better than Tony Pollard. I know there was a lot of conversation about which one would be better, because Pollard did show signs of being better than Elliott last season. So it was kind of up in the air. Like Elliott was being drafted as low as, I think, like RB20 in some drafts. So he was pretty down there. They both ended up kind of having stinky days for fantasy. So I think like Elliott needs to be the guy. They just need to feed him a little bit more. Now, I know there have been injuries to their offensive line that could have impacted some of the play overall. But I mean, I'm not feeling great about either of those guys. I was kind of hoping one would just like distinguish himself, but it's like RB45 and RB56. So not that great. And the person that actually ended up leading the Cowboys in receiving was, I wrote Brown. I'm actually not sure of his first name, but he ended up as the wide receiver 35, 5 catches for 68 yards. Noah Brown. Yes. Thank you. Came out of nowhere. I don't know. I mean, Gallup was inactive for this game, so he could be someone that's like to keep on your radar, but I mean, I don't know what to make of this at this point.
Can I ask you something? Because I kind of think you hear the axiom all the time, right? That, you know, when you get a rookie quarterback or a backup quarterback, sometimes they go to the tight end as that quote unquote security blanket. We also are thinking that Dallas is going to be down in games now, right? They went from, you know, a 1.5 point favorite already now a 7-point dog in week 2 against the Bengals. I wonder if they're going to be losing games, which most people project to be happening. Do you think maybe we get some, you know, garbage time? Quite frankly, Samantha, you know, the idea of them being down in games, whether it's Cooper Rush or whoever, kind of volume throwing and maybe even more targets for guys like Lamb and Schultz and less running touches for guys like Zeke?
I don't know, because, you know, Lamb had 11 targets yesterday and didn't do much with them. And garbage time with a guy like Cooper Rush versus Jameis Winston, who used to be the king of garbage time, is a little different. So, I mean, it's the quality of the throws is what I'm talking about. That's fair. I mean, I maybe that elevates it a little bit just talking about game script, but I'm pretty concerned about, I would say Lamb, I'm probably the most concerned about of anyone, because you had to drop a pretty significant draft pick to get him.
No, obviously. I mean, you drafted CeeDee Lamb as your wideout 1, probably, I would say, like in the 2nd round of a lot of drafts, but you're still starting him, to be correct, right, Samantha? You said he fell to like a wideout 2, maybe a wideout 2-3 at the very worst. So he's still a start, correct?
Yes, he's still a start at this point. Like, we have to kind of toe that very thin line of overreacting, then also taking this data point. Like, it would be silly to not take into week 1 like that into consideration at all, but it would also be silly to replace everything we knew about CeeDee Lamb and every single player previously with that one data point. So it's like 5.8% of the season is over for the Cowboys. So I mean, there's a lot of football to be played.